Welcome to another episode of Leaders in Lending. I'm Matt Snow here with Greg and Amir from Salesforce live at CBA. Greg, Amir, welcome. Why don't you take a minute to introduce yourselves, talk about what you do at Salesforce.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here. My name is Greg Blausey. I'm a senior director in our financial services cloud product organization. In that capacity, I work directly with customers and with industry leaders to help make sure that our industry verticalized products and point of view and solutions are headed in the right direction and generally trying to stay to where the puck is going in the industry.
Awesome. Amir Madjlessi, industry advisor at Salesforce, been here for about 3 years, but have spent almost 20 years in financial services and have seen the movie before on how clients are contending with big business problems. In my role, I cover the US and Canada, and we really try to unearth what the biggest and brightest problems are for our clients, bring practical solutions to them, and figure out a way that we can leverage the platform in an extensible way. So looking forward to that conversation.
Great. And it's a pleasure being joined with two reformed bankers. We talked with some of the guests about like accidental careers in banking, but I'd love to hear from each of you, like how you got in and out of banking to now more on the service side.
Yeah, so I spent the first 20 years of my career working directly in the industry and may have crossed paths with a couple folks sitting at this table at various points in that career. And, I was very fortunate to have a few different roles in banking. I started out my career in retail banking as a teller, like a lot of us have actually, and just kind of worked my way around the bank. I worked on a corporate banking team and in the commercial space, specifically spending a lot of time in treasury management, and had the opportunity to do a lot of roles. My last 5 years I was at the bank, I actually was the business owner of our Salesforce deployment across the enterprise, which is where I got my experience with the technology and really, really liked it and thought, I'm gonna make a leap over there. So about 7 years ago, I did just that.
Nice. Yeah, not surprised. So Greg and I did work together at Huntington Bank in Columbus and on the retail side. And I just remember your passion around like the use of technology to enable the consumer and banker relationship. So not surprised to see you on this side, like helping many other financial institutions on that journey.
Yeah, for sure. It's a passion.
Yeah.
No doubt. So I started in banking in the retail franchise, managing branches, regions, larger territories, zigzagged around the organization quite a bit, went to strategy, went to business banking, managed relationship managers, and then had the opportunity to actually go on and run the consumer strategy at another large regional, and had the staffing model, incentive plans, data analytics, the operating budget for the firm, and had the pleasure of implementing the platform as well at both institutions, in addition to other platforms as well. So it's now I saw the inflection point of technology and the need for technology well before the pandemic arrived. The pandemic obviously accelerated some of the need and the passion for that. And so I thought, which organization would take a clunky banker like me and leverage them in their ecosystem? But Salesforce was such a great fit culturally and for us to find ways to really walk in the shoes of our customers. And so that transition was really related to how do we actually more deeply understand our customer needs and how do we apply technology to solve those problems. So it was a great match.
Awesome, great. Well, I know technology and AI, and we'll get to those things, get a lot of the press, but one of the things that is spoken to me at this conference that you guys have hit on is just the data and the foundational layer of data and getting that right, getting it organized, or how do you make best use of it? Maybe let's start with that. Like, what are you seeing in terms of the customers you're helping? Like, what's their state of their data? What are their biggest needs? Or what advice would you have for banks like struggling with, what do I do? Like, how do I get my data AI ready?
Yeah, and maybe I'll start where I'm going to end with my response, and that is that AI is the hot topic of the moment, and it should come as no surprise that good data is good AI and bad data is quite the opposite. And so it has certainly accelerated some conversations and strategies at some financial institutions, although I would say that folks have been on a data journey for a while. I would sometimes say that almost the strive for perfection was almost to a fault in some cases, where it was like, oh, I think we have to have this perfect, and good wasn't good enough. And that's unfortunate, because I think that those same folks are the ones that are finding themselves trying to play catch up to those that were more forward looking. So I'd say just in general, the industry's been on this data cleanse, refresh, reorganization, and truly understanding the value of the data that they hold. Now in this world that we're in, it's not only the data, but what data, what data has a shelf life of usefulness, and how do I consume it, and how do I consume it in massive amounts? How do I harmonize and unify that data so that I've got one understanding of who Matt is as my customer?
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of, I think, where folks are landing right now, or what they're trying to figure out, because they know that in order to deliver the promise of AI, or deliver on that promise that we are all hoping it brings to the industry, that is really critical and foundational.
Yeah, I guess that's a good nuance. So you're saying that you don't have to have your data like cleanse and strategy set first before you leap into AI. You could do some of these in parallel.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's exactly what we're seeing, is some folks are kind of flying the plane in the air, right, as they're built, or maybe I got that backwards, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Build the plane while they're flying it. That's it. But it is, I mean, it is something that goes, and it's also, you know, you get your data to a certain state, and I guarantee you that's not going to be the final state. So it's something that you're always kind of working with and massaging. We talked in the panel discussion yesterday, you know, about even just idea of test data and making sure that it is whole and representative of the, you know, base that you want to serve, and that you've got the right amount of data, and then it's fresh data, right? Because these models are learning off of that data, and so it's just really important to even give consideration to that kind of element.
I'd love to build on what Greg is talking about, though, Matt, because I think, I feel like it's a race without a finish line, because the amount of data that's accumulating on a daily basis, and listen, in financial services, it's a knowledge-based industry. And so it's like, how do I now interpret that information as a business line leader and a P&L owner formerly? You know, I got a lot of information a lot of times, but I'm not sure I got a lot of insight around that data. So it's not only taking what Greg said, but putting it into an actionable format. So you've got data, you've got a UI that you got to worry about, so that you can deliver it to people that are interacting with customers. But you have models behind that now, whether those are LLMs that are externally purchased and integrated with, or you're building it on your own. So there's an opportunity for us to now build those things together in a cohesive way so that you can actually serve customers in an intelligent manner.
Yeah, so what do you think is the fastest path to those insights? Are customers coming to you with like the insights they're striving for and looking to connect that to the data, or vice versa?
I think it's challenging because it's broad and it's vast kind of set of options architecturally, or the UI that I was referring to, or even the models that you're going to engage in. And then how do I account for the regulatory landscape that, quite frankly, I'm not sure that the cement is quite dry on how, you know, our regulating bodies feel about the usage of certain data.
Yeah.
So I do think it's a matter of taking that a mass amount of information and thinking about the use cases that actually impact people's business imperatives, and then cobbling together the data set, the UI, and the model that makes the most sense for the use case. Because otherwise, it's such a large endeavor for organizations. They can be crushed by the magnitude of the effort, and that could be paralyzing for a lot of organizations. So we really try to figure out what's the broad vision, but then let's get down to the use case level so that we're actually solving real business problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. We found the status quo is often the biggest competitor to doing some of these innovative changes. Do you find then challenges around compliance, privacy, as the data itself is ever changing, like customers' expectations, the regulators' view? Like, how do you think about those?
Well, I think it's, again, down to the use case level. So if there's something that, you know, a regulatory clock starts, well, then the amount of information that you need and the speed in which and the access and who has that, I think becomes paramount, right? So
yeah, I think we're seeing that in some of the early use cases that are emerging. It's typically going to be a little bit lower risk use case, one where we definitely would still want to keep a human in the loop, so that there's that at least guidance of, you know, critical thinking human being engaged in the process.
Gotcha. What other aspects of AI are you seeing introduced into, you know, the questions your customers are coming to you with, or maybe some of the innovations even within Salesforce?
Yeah, so a term, if you're not familiar with this term, and watch, they'll play this podcast 6 months from now and everybody will know it, but it's retrieval augmented generation. And you will hear people talk about it in its acronym form, RAG. And so heavily regulated industries like financial services are running to RAG. And what that really means is rather than going out and searching these vast LLMs that, may have training data that might be, months old, to rely on, what this is really doing is saying, number one, it's kind of reducing compute power that would be needed to generate some responses, because what it's doing is saying, okay, here's my scenario, here's my situation, here's my customer and what I know about them. Now only go search this universe. And it is really a way that I think regulated industries, like financial services, are really going to be able to adopt generative AI more quickly. And it's also, in addition to that, there's like this whole auditability component on it. So an example might be, you call in, you've got a question about, say, a wire transfer or something, right? And okay, great, I'm an agent, I just need to really quickly, I'll do a query on that and return it and say, I'm giving Matt this response, and I'm giving Matt this response because my bank says that this is our policy as it relates to that question, and this is our policy because of this regulation. And so there's this auditability factor that is really critical. And then that human in the loop component, right? So it's even bigger than that. It's like, okay, great, well, I've got this response back, but what did the human do? Did they execute as I said, or as the tool responded, or did we have to kind of nudge it in a different direction because it wasn't quite right?
Yeah. So, I'll have to admit, that was a new term for me, so I did search that immediately after you said that in the session. Do you view that as like a completely separate class of like GPTs, or is it a different flavor? Or
I'd say it's kind of a subset of it, right? So like as we've been kind of thinking about generative AI, just in general, not we as in Salesforce, but just generally as a population, everybody's very focused on these LLMs, and it's still a part of it. But you're saying like only search this part of it, right? Because I know my answer's in there somewhere that I need, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful. What else in terms of AI driven? It seems like personalization was also a key topic.
For sure, yeah. And here's the thing, Matt, I've been thinking about, and I've been gone from the bank for 7 years, and I remember 7 years ago still talking about personalization. And so personalization is certainly interesting, and a part of personalization is going to be a segmentation strategy and kind of getting down to the small group. But what I'm really excited about with generative AI is, a more current term around personalization is kind of category of one. And so I've been using that terminology because I think that really resonates with marketers, because at the end of the day, we are all different and we all have very different needs. And although we may have a common set of tools in the financial services space, to solve some of these challenges, the way I might consume something versus Amir versus you could be totally different based on our scenario. And that's why I think this category of one idea is really, really important, and it kind of, in my mind, is like next level personalization stuff.
I want to build on that just for a second, because I think historically I see personalization conversations going on to generate demand and convert the top of the funnel, if you will, of activity and opportunity. I also think there's a tremendous opportunity to think about the service excellence that you're trying to deliver for your clients. Sure. And so when I think of lending, if I'm a business banker or commercial officer, I've got renewals. What's the level of intelligence that I have at my disposal, and does the client have the same amount of information? If I'm sitting there in a mortgage situation, how am I actually able to personalize the experience in such a way that it's reflective of their financial position, the experience that they are looking for and expect, and of course what capabilities we can deliver in that time. So I always feel like there's an opportunity to go much broader than just the top of the funnel and sales conversions.
Totally agree. And to borrow your phrase, I think personalization is another race without a finish line or an end, right? It's a negotiation or a dance continually with the consumer, with the company, in terms of what's okay for the company to know and use and leverage in terms of the data or information they may have, or what's the consumer expectation and what they're coming with, but all to help facilitate.
That's right. Well, think about a recent regulatory change that's happening. Dodd-Frank Section 1071. You're going to collect a lot more information, but you can't share that information with every single person in the ecosystem if you're going to do a lending opportunity, right? Because underwriters cannot see the incremental information that's being collected on that data expectation. So I do think that personalizing it for even the personas that are inside the organization is actually a real interesting opportunity for us to move faster for clients.
Interesting. Are there other pieces of automation you see happening either on like the direct-to-consumer or with bank staff? Anything that helps?
Well, I think personally, my personal experience has been The middle and back office that has this heavy, intensive human infrastructure need is where there's ripe opportunity. I think there's plenty of studies that demonstrate there's trillions of dollars in annual economic value associated to actually improving the efficiency, because it takes a lot of human intervention a lot of times to help deliver a product or a service or a request from a client. Why don't we augment with digital colleagues, if you will, to help either delegate to AI, or maybe in the new wave, as we kind of talked about in our deep dive, how about the client being able to delegate to AI and then actually having the human in the loop to ensure that it's appropriate for that customer? So there's this kind of interesting wave that's going on right now.
Yeah, interesting. And I still have islands in the stream, like in the back of my head, so thank you for that earworm earlier. But if for those of you at the session, we'll get that joke. But the other thing I think about talking about data again is, how do you know what data is relevant for what decisions? And you had some really interesting ideas around either like reaching data where it was, or thinking about again, using data not maybe in a stored or artificial way, but going to those sources when you need it. Like, can you describe more of that?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it's kind of like there's data that's trapped in an enterprise application like a core banking application, right? And we might want to access, say, transaction information or even transaction details in a service context or something like that, right? So that's kind of one element of data. Then there's data that might be in or provided and integrated via a third-party data aggregator, right? Who's we're able to consume data in that regard. And then there's kind of like all these other places that data might live. And one of the stats on that very slide that we had the islands in the stream joke about was, that 71% of companies say that, or I'm sorry, of the applications at an organization, on average, 71% of them are disconnected. That was a proprietary research that our team at MuleSoft did with our customer base, which I think is just really astounding and speaks to kind of like the missed opportunities that we're talking about when we don't have a good data strategy. Now, one thing on that slide, though, as we were talking about, and if you can visualize a river with data islands sitting in it, there were some examples of big islands in there, and they had logos of partners of ours on there, right? Amazon, Google, Snowflake as examples, and certainly that is part of a data strategy, right? Like, I got to get my data in order, and they play a very important part in that. But the challenge is then you may have your data in order, and you may have it someplace that's useful for data scientists and marketers potentially to go in mind. But if you're really just thinking about serving it up in an actionable way in the context of work or a banker's day, that's a miss, right? Because it's not like your bankers are going and logging into Snowflake directly. Right. And if they did, they wouldn't know what to do when they were in there, right? They're bankers, not data scientists. And so just this idea of freeing that data up. And then in terms of like the right data at the right time, that's, I think, a matter of, well, what's the situation? Right? Is it a service situation? Is a sales opportunity? Is it more just kind of routine financial wellness type of activity that we're doing, and what might that do? And just kind of having the ability to put the controls in place or levers in place and dials to be able to surface that right information to the banker or the client at the right time is incredibly powerful.
I'll just add too that it feels like it's all types of forms of data too, right? So there's streaming data, whether that's mobile or online engagement, or there's batch data, because maybe sometimes the integration effort is Herculean, if you will, in nature, and it doesn't feel like that's achievable by some clients. So again, finding a way to say, what do I need, for what reason, for which persona, and where is this going to come from, and where can I use it intelligently? So it's not just the kind of traditional sources of data, but what about digital signals, the hand raises that are happening with your client all throughout their experience and ecosystem? Are you able to pick that up, interpret that, and actually use it in an experience or an interaction? That's, I think, when magic can really happen.
Gotcha. Do you envision a future where either the platforms are more natively integrated, or there's middleware layers that facilitate that discovery faster, or will that always be a challenge of?
Well, listen, I think I always describe it as simple but not easy, right? So we talk about it in such simple ways, but when you have been part of an organization that has 1,000 applications and potential various platforms, aggregating and wrangling that data can be extraordinarily challenging. But I'll be honest, and forgive me for the shameless plug, but I think that's what Salesforce is focused on, is our data cloud product that allows for the variety of different types of data sources, different data types, and even in file and batch or streaming types of data, to be able to aggregate that. The key though is being able to unify so that we know when we talk to Matt, it is the same Matt that's using the mobile app, it's the same Matt that has an unsecured loan potentially, and the same Matt that has a small business and is an entrepreneur. And how do we really understand the full relationship? Because that helps us with relationship pricing, risk management, and quite frankly, people are just used to that in their personal lives in every other way. It's connected, it's social, and quite frankly, when they have their experience with many financial institutions, it's the antithesis of that.
Yeah, true. And one of the things you mentioned, Greg, I think was around like metadata. Like that is important in making sure all that connects. And
well, and that's kind of the secret sauce, right? At the end of the day, to where we're spending our time and really working is, we're fortunate in that we're a CRM, right? At our roots, and that is where customer data is sitting, and this understanding, and it creates this opportunity to engage with customers. So not only do we have that customer data, but we have the metadata about it. In our product set at Salesforce, all of those apps that we have are built on that common metadata layer. So it's kind of the data about the data, right? And understanding what the data elements actually each represent, and then the ability we've got a couple of different avenues to bring data in or to engage the data where it sits, so in a totally zero copy kind of way, because some data security folks aren't going to be too excited about moving data from one place to another. So great, how can I look at it where it is, but visualize it in the context of my customer engagement and with that metadata layer on top of it, right? So I've got this understanding. Then make use of it in generative AI, and that's really where the magic comes to life.
And that can unlock the scale, probably, like you're talking about, getting down to an audience of one. Like you could do that at an institution, but the cost continues to escalate as you break down the audience. So, like, are there metrics? Because you did talk a lot about driving down cost of acquisition or servicing. Are there other metrics you help your customers like understand their programs or how they're making improvements? Like how do they know they're succeeding on this journey?
Yeah, it's sort of, it depends on where they're starting, right? If I'm a marketer, I'm really going to be concerned about the effectiveness of my campaigns, right? Or my offers that I'm putting out there, and my personalization efforts. Like, am I really getting the return on that I wanted to do? The pull through, managing something like this on a platform that gives you visibility not only to your marketing efforts, but your sales efforts, and then even farther down the road, loyalty, right? Like you can have a much better and straight line view on the effectiveness actually of your marketing. So like that's one example. The other would be something as simple but something
simple
like,
but not easy.
But your CSAT scores, right? I mean, because I really do think this stuff, and what I'm terribly excited about, Matt, and I think it'll be a minute before we get there, but Amir was kind of alluding to it, is when we are able to combine AI and automation all in one, where things can kind of just happen. I mean, don't you sometimes have the expectations like, well, they know that about me. Why didn't they just do it?
Right.
Like, why did we have to make a, conversation back and forth and 14 emails just to do something really, really simple? Why didn't they just do it? And I think we're really close. The technology exists today. The fact of the matter is we could go out there and put something like that in place today. It's just, there's a little trepidation yet. We've got to get past that as an industry and begin to really trust the tool in order to I think, allow those experiences to get there. But that's a great example of CSAT, where it's just like, my bank knows me. They really do take care of me. Right.
I do want to build on that, because I think one of the other things that I quite frankly talk a lot about is a lot of people come to me and go, how do we drive privacy? It's like, well, that's a lagging indicator of sorts. So how do you know that you're implementing technology and facilitating conversation digitally or in a human or hybrid scenario? And what are the leading indicators that your actual technology investments are translating into real economic value? So it might be a level of adoption, readership. There might be the time to actually serve up a solution. I think of marketing, I would have very expensive data scientists work on our behalf to interpret marketing campaign ROI and the responsiveness of even certain control groups or otherwise. deposit growth is a little bit of a hot topic
Yeah,
these days.
for sure.
What about the opportunity to expedite what is normally a 7, 8, 9 week turnaround on insights of a previous campaign?
Yeah.
By the way, I've already set the budget and the marketing campaign for the following quarter, but yet I have not had the insights already.
Yeah.
So think about the speed and agility and velocity that you can move around sub-segmentation. When you think about sales productivity, when you're in retail banking, it's about leads, it's about referrals. How can we reduce the time that it takes to getting from you to a partner?
Yeah.
How do we improve the KPIs around the conversion of those referrals? These are still core competencies of a retail bank today.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, people still struggle with actioning because every day and hour that goes by that's not actioned on that referral, there's a less likelihood of them buying whatever said product or service that's being teed up. So like that's where I see a lot of the interaction of, and that's why I think I emphasize use case by use case.
Yeah.
Because if we think about like the organizational objectives, if we're being honest, every organization has very similar financial ratios that they need to improve,
Yeah.
whether that's efficiency or net income or cost of deposits or funding. But like, what are the real levers and drivers that we can pull on to really go forward in an outperformance way, if you will?
Yeah, so you definitely hit a hot topic on deposits. Are you guys seeing anything outside of price wars, customers who are succeeding in winning deposits, bringing in new customers, deepening relationships? Where are the successes happening there?
Yeah, I think while smart, intelligent elasticity pricing and modeling can help you understand the right segment that's going to buy at the right rate and give you the balanced performance that you're looking for, because that's kind of, it's not deposit growth at all cost, right?
Right.
I think it's like deposit growth at a prudent rate and what the funding needs of the organization might look like.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, yes, being smart about the intelligence and the analytics around how we can interact with those customers. That's a big winning recipe. But it's also simple things like, what's the onboarding experience when somebody actually raises their hand and says yes?
Yeah.
Because there's a massive amount of abandonment rate when you're digitally engaging or even in a branch environment. If you can't fully bring the account to fruition, fund the account, and get it used quickly, that leads to privacy, by the way, at some point, right?
Sure.
So I think there's some pretty big opportunities, and we're seeing some clients succeed in that way.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Probably one of the benefits of a company like Salesforce is you have many other verticals to learn from. So are you seeing with your peers in maybe less regulated spaces, things that you're learning from or ideas that could potentially catch on in banking sometime? Or
This was it's almost like you knew this, because onboarding is it is a passion of mine, because I just think that experience has for far too long been rocky. And, I don't know about you, Matt, but like if we went out, to a lot of banks and we said we want to open a checking account, we want to take out a loan, and we want to do so simultaneously. I don't know what the stat is, but I can guarantee it's more than not. We're probably going to have to go down one path first with a series of questions that's very product driven, and another path going down the loan path that's very product driven, and probably 60% of the questions are going to be the same, right? And so I say that because I look to retail, and think about just how easy some online retail experiences have gotten, and so we're learning from our friends over in that particular industry and what those experiences might look like. And I'd say this notion of like shopping cart is really starting to take hold in some conversations at banks. So how can I make my experience more Amazon-like, frankly, right? And streamline. You already know a lot of the stuff about me. In theory, if I'm an existing customer, why isn't it just as simple as adding these to my cart and hitting checkout?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would offer a couple of different, very public logos that we've talked about. One, Disney, Formula One, Gucci. They are all, there's a commonality between all these stories around the ingestion of behavioral activity and digital signals that their clients are exhibiting, be able to harness that and serve it up in such a personalized way that it blows people's socks off, that they know exactly what ride that I want to ride or what movies that I've seen if I'm a Disney fan. If I'm at Formula One, the ecosystem that's built around Formula One and the amount of fanfare that's being built related to it. I think what they don't have are some of the handcuffs, quite frankly, because they're not highly regulated industries.
Interesting.
So they get to use that data in probably a more expansive and a little bit more free way with test and learn.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, it's a bit of a cautionary approach in financial services, and
Sure.
rightfully so. I mean, we're systemically important to people's lives and well-being in financial services versus if I don't make it to some of those other brands, no one's going to get hurt, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great. Well, I appreciate both of you taking some time out of your busy day to do this. Any other closing thoughts you want to leave with?
Don't be scared and get in there now.
Yeah.
Because guess what? The world is not waiting for you. And everybody else is talking about it and doing this. So when it comes to AI, let's get in there, test, let's learn, let's, talk and have great conversations, because not only is everybody else doing it that competes against you, but your customers are going to become accustomed to it in the space. And so there's no better time than right now.
Great.
I would just offer that, think about an outcomes-based approach. So again, I kind of harped and labored this point probably too much at this point, but the use case by use case opportunities, what are the expected outcomes? And let's build a business case that's really relevant to what you're trying to achieve. And we can pressure test that with your internal data and outside in view, but let's build a business case for change that is palatable and on whatever time horizon the institution's looking for. I just think it's like jump into your point, Greg. Let's understand what it is that it takes to be successful. Let's build a financial model because, in financial services, I hope we've got a good business case to invest in strategies and innovation. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Amir, Greg, thanks so much for the
Thank
time.
you.
Yeah, thank you.